Welcome to Bollywood to Hollywood with Rampilla. We have a special guest today, a French director and a novelist, Mr. Olivier. And recently he did this movie where I met you in Tunisia, Soleils. Soleil means sun, right?
Sons.
Yeah. So Soleils is suns. So we'll come to that. What we are, let's see your commercial life before we go into your film life. Let's see the commercial we have.
المملكة النفط مراتب المسؤولية والشرف كلها بين يديك.
نعم يا أبي.
هنالك مسألة صغيرة.
أمر يا أبي.
عليك أن تتخلى عن كليو.
أتخلى عنها يا أبي دون أن أجد أي داع لذلك؟ انظر يا أبي، لقد صدق الفرنسيون بقول ألا تودنغام.
هذا سيشير فيس.
So this is your Clio commercial. It looks good, but the last one we saw was from Russia, but this one is from Arabic country. So it's quite a contrast, a cultural contrast. You have anything to say about it?
Yes, it was the same thing that with the Russian one. So it was a big campaign for Clio, and each time it was shot in the original language. So in Russia, in Russian, in Arabia, in Arabic. After we shot in China, and we shot another one in Sicily. So each time in different languages also. And it was great because it was really a real experience of, in fact, of cinema, even if it was commercial, but it was really made like little films, and it was made with a real master of commercials, a guy called Barry Myers, who was a fantastic director and with whom I learned a lot. And,
well, you also did another commercial. Well, you have done umpteen number, but with Cindy Crawford, right?
Yes.
And then you started filming and films. You have affinity towards African themes. Since you married a Turkish lady, I would have thought maybe to the Arabic themes. What is it that inspires towards these African themes?
You know, in fact, it's really related with I would say with people. It started when we were shooting commercials in South Africa. I had a lot of admiration for what was doing Mandela and the ANC during the 90s. So I read Mandela's book, A Long Walk to Freedom, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And one of the things which I found very interesting is that this man was driven by values which were very African and very interesting, and values that we could totally understand. One of them, when they went to power, and they after, so it was in '94. One of the things that they did in order to get out of the apartheid and to try to have people living together, I mean white people and black people, they made this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And Truth and Reconciliation Commission is a pure product of African justice, sense of justice. So I found it very, very interesting. So that's why I decided to make a feature film set in South Africa, and it was The Wooden Camera. Then, when I was presenting The Wooden Camera, somebody told me, it was in France, somebody told me, I have a subject for you. It's a portrait of a man who has been the second president of Upper Volta. I did not know him. I had no special interest in that kind of character. Just to be polite, I read the diary of this person that I was given. And when I read it, I really fall in love with this man, who was absolutely fantastic. He was a very simple man. He was absolutely not an educated man like Mandela or like Senghor, but he was driven by the same values and principles than Mandela was driven with. And for me, it was very interesting, and I thought, okay, it means that maybe from south to north of Africa, there is a common thing, and it would be very interesting to. So I tried to make a documentary about this man who was still alive at this time. He was 90 years old. And one day, so I wanted to replace, in fact, his life and what he did into the history of Africa. So it was including the slavery and the colonization and so on. So it was something very big, and nobody wanted to make it. And this man, this president, who was called Lamizana, one day he died. And I was very, of course, very sad, but I did not want to stop to make this documentary. And I met a man who told me, but you know, my father knew very well this man and could talk about him. And the father of this man, it was Sotigui Kouyaté, who was the biggest African actor, who was working with Peter Brook in France. He worked in Mahabharata with Peter Brook. And in fact, he started with Peter Brook in early 80s. And he never stopped because Peter Brook really adored him, and he made everything with him. And they went together to Africa and so on. So he became very important for Peter Brook, but for many people. And really, this man, Sotigui, he is the most beautiful person I've
What's
never.
his name?
Sotigui Kouyaté. Sotigui Kouyaté, you see, it's here. You have this picture. I don't know if you see it. So it was on newspaper when he died. He died some years ago. So effectively, Sotigui had known very well this president Lamizana, and so we tried to make this documentary together, but we could not. I could not find the finance. And one day, Sotigui told me, but why don't you write a screenplay of a feature film? I thought, he's right. We are together since many years. We have spoken a lot about Africa and so on, and I would like to do something. And so the next day, I sat in my office, on my table, and I started a trip with Sotigui, going like that. And I wrote Soleils. I wrote it in 5 weeks. And it was just at the beginning, I did not know what I was writing. I knew that it was about Africa, and Sotigui was driving us somewhere. And it was really the only thing I knew. So and it came like that. And in fact, I built it like a philosophical tale, you know, so it's a philosophical tale like people like Voltaire or Diderot wrote. During this process, I proposed to one of the sons of Sotigui, who was one of my friends, who is also a director. I said to him, why don't we do this film together? We had already some other projects and so on. I said, look, I really don't know what you are writing, but finish to write it, and when it's written, I read, and so we will see. So I finished to write a script, sent it to him, and we say, okay, let's do it. So it was written for Sotigui, who had, unfortunately at this moment, he was already very sick, very ill, and he died some months later. But we did the film. We found another actor, and so this film is quite original for some things. The first one is that it is a film which is really the vision of an African on a European, or Burkinabes on a French, about Africa and about the relationship between Africa and Europe or Western world. Maybe the second originality is that it's a film which shows a positive view of Africa. When you think, all the films which are made about Africa are all negative. It's always about war, about children in war, about AIDS, about corruption, and so on. The only exception being Mandela. Mandela, okay, fantastic, he is an icon. All the other things in Africa, it's always sadness and so on. And it's not the view that we have, and it's not the view that we have developed in this film. And what we wanted to say in this film is that, look, Africa may have something to tell us, and we should be more curious about it.
Let's watch the trailer and see, let the audience know a little bit about the film.
Okay.
Could we run the trailer, please?
Their fears had no reason, their hate was their poison, their laws were our prison, their love had no season, the future no vision, they killed father and son. Oh, what a long walk to freedom. What a long walk to freedom. We stood up for the fight, struggling at night. We died for our rights. Dreams became election, truth, reconciliation, the birth of our nation. Oh, what a long walk to freedom. Oh, what a long walk to freedom.
It's kind of rediscovery of the roots, and basically you're symbolically using this character Dokamisa to find out what really to be an African and feel proud of their heritage. Even before all these revolutions, you mentioned in your film there was a Mandali Charter before the French Declaration of Man, or American Declaration of Independence, or Magna Carta in British England. Then it's the journey. So he takes this Dokamisa onto the journey.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was thinking about this, Harry Potter. He goes on a journey, and they have the similar car, but they go into the train and things fly. Because you take us from 13th century to the modern times as we go in this journey. Who is this great uncle who helped her grandfather, who lived in 13th century. It's kind of a fairy tale and interesting. And then you take it to the intellectuals, from the journey to the slowly to the white magic, and to the there is a the white. I call it white magic because it turns everyone into a kind of slave tool. So am I right in describing the way I'm describing?
So,
it's your film, so yeah, there is this.
no, what you're saying is right. In fact, the story is that at the beginning, Camisa, who is the granddaughter of the Emperor Sunjata, is sick. She is ill, and her illness is that she has lost memory, the memory of her ancestors and the memory of her history, and she does not dream. And so Sotigi will try to bring her back, to save her by bringing her back to her roots and to give her the possibility of dreaming. So, of course, the Camisa is a kind of metaphor of Africa. So the story of Africa, you know, the speech of Sarkozy in Dakar 3 years ago or 4 years ago. He said that to Africans, he said, now you should try to come to history. You, until now, you have not history. You are not playing in history. You should come to history. And it was a big scandal and so on. And this is coming from something that Hegel, the German philosopher,
the
said.
Intellectuals, right?
Yeah, he said is that no, Africa has no history. So we colonize them after changing them to slave, putting them to slavery. We colonize them and we convince them that before us they were nothing. They had no history and so on. So it's what we are showing in this film. And so the Camisa has no recollection of her past, but she has a past. So Sotigi will give her the way to go back to her past and to her roots. So that's the story of the whole film. So it's a long way.
You also, can we have those pictures, intellectual? Yeah. From these intellectuals, then you go to these couple of people who are like jokers. So is this a comic relief like Shakespeare does in his plays? Because that was kind of interesting.
So it's the whole process of Sotigi to bring Camisa back to life, in fact, goes through tales. He tells her many tales. And one of the tales is around truth and lie. And as the film is the form of the film is very free, because I wrote it as a philosophical tale. We can play as we want. So when we can come from the 13th century to the 21st century and then back to the 18th century and so on. And sometimes we can be in reality or in tale or in. So when he speaks about lie and truth, we are with them, and because it was funny to have those two characters, and so it was for the pleasure.
Yes, yeah, I see that. This kind of imagination, though it's good, but where did you get this idea of this journey, going on a car, going back to 13th century, then back to 21st century, and all that?
I thought that to say what I wanted to say about Africa, I did not want to set up a normal story just now, or I wanted to go through many things. So this way of writing, which is absolutely not the normal way of writing. You know, now all the scripts have to be written more or less the same way. You have people who are always trying to say, yes, at this time you must have that kind of thing happening, and at this time that time of thing happening, and so on. And for me, it does not work. Or I mean, it can work, but it's not the only way to tell a story or to say something. When you read Voltaire or when you read Diderot or many people, you don't tell them, oh, but your dramaturgy is not correct. It's you should no. You read, and if it's interesting, you read it and you like it. So I wrote it like that, and it gave me, in fact, a lot of freedom. So after it was a question of imagination, going to this century to another century, going to this playing with the characters and so on. It was just the pleasure of creating something.
You know, I really enjoyed it because I had a teacher. He just passed away a few months ago. He used to give us, you have to have a theme. Then once you have the theme, it is a free flow. So it's like yellow brick. The theme gives you the yellow brick road. So you have to reach the Emerald City. So meanwhile, there will be witches. There will be so many other things will happen. Lions, tigers, all that stuff. So you never know what happens. So that way it is interesting. So I mean, I really enjoyed that process. But then you take us to the Robben Island and Mandela. And you used that song from Barbara Hendricks.
Barbara Hendricks, she's a very famous opera singer. She's American, and she has sung in many big operas, and also in some films. She played in La Bohème, Puccini's La Bohème as a film. She's really great. What happened, in fact, is that when I was editing the film, just after the Robben Island, I put a song of Miriam Makeba, you know, the famous South African singer. But we could not buy the rights of this song. It was too expensive. So my musician said to me, okay, why don't you write something? And then so I said, okay, I wrote something, in fact, on the same tempo than Miriam Makeba's song, which was quite a big thing. And he said, I wrote it in French. And my musician said, no, we are just coming out of Robben Island. Why don't you write something in English? So I wrote something in English, and I said, okay, let's go until the end of the process, and let's try to have a great voice, English voice or English-speaking voice, who is related to apartheid or to discrimination. So it was either a South African voice or an American voice, African American. So I saw to Barbara Hendricks, and I sent her a letter and the music and the song, and she liked it, and so she called me. We spoke about the film. She wanted to see the film. She saw the film, and she said, "Okay, I'm with you." So we went with the musician to Sweden, because she lives in Sweden, and we recorded her voice there, and now she's in the film.
That's great. Then you take us to the some of the native rulers or teachers. So besides Mandela, that is how they. Well, we don't have to be told by a white man what is being right or wrong or intelligent or unintelligent. We have our own wisdom. Is that your point with these native people who are the teachers, and as well as the whatever that president?
Yes. You know, that's why it's called suns. Suns is it's stars. There are the lights which give us the big lights, the big suns, who give us some light in the darkness and give us some directions. So Mandela is one of them, but this man Lamizana also is one of them, or like Tierno Boca, this man who is the teacher with the young kids, is also one of them. And so of course in Africa there are many words of wisdom. What is interesting is that in fact we also very often we see Africa like something very. If people who like Africa often like it for its folklore and so on. What we are saying is that no. In Africa, we African people have developed some tools in for the how to live together, or about society, about some wisdoms, about justice and so on, that we can use. As I said before, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is a tool which is a pure product of African justice, and we can use it, Western people, and we do it. So it's that kind of thing that we are trying to say with the film.
I think whether in your film or somewhere, they say there were no jails in South Africa until white man came.
Absolutely. No, and which is true. You know, I had this impression, and I was not, when I was writing it, I'd never read it before, so I was not sure. So I found a jurist, a lawyer or specialist about law in Senegal, a young man who is a specialist of traditional African law. So we spoke, and I tell them my idea about that, and she said, yes, absolutely, you are right. There were no prison before white people came. So that's interesting.
And this has gone to several festivals. I saw a clip of yours where they show it to, like in the open field, to the Africans. So I kind of liked that kind of setup. It shows it's a people's movie and people's theater. So what is next to you, Olivier?
I'm happy with writing and filming. If I can continue to write and to make films, I'm very happy.
Okay, whatever makes you happy will make us happy. So I wish you all the best, and thanks for coming onto the show, Bollywood to Hollywood.
What a long walk to freedom.